The courier pod was ready. Earth registry active. Oxygen green. 9 minutes from freedom. Ethan Caldwell had every reason to leave the dying alien princess behind. She had kidnapped him, used him, and turned his heartbeat into royal evidence. But when the forced resonance chamber began crushing her pulse into static, he placed the escape card on the floor and walked back toward the glass. Welcome to Galactic Contact. We hope you enjoy this video and have a day filled with happiness. Now, settle in and follow the story as it begins. The auction house hung 300 miles above Vera's night side, a ring of black glass and white light bolted to a private orbit where laws arrived late and money arrived early. Ethan Caldwell stood inside a transparent restraint field with his wrists folded in front of him, not because he had accepted the situation, but because the first test of the cuffs had burned a clean red line around his skin and taught him the price of wasted motion. His charcoal suit still carried the shape of the New Geneva dinner he had been taken from. Torn sleeve, loose tie, one cufflink missing. On the balconies above, alien nobles leaned over curved rails of polished bone while translation halos whispered around their heads and private bids shimmered in the air. They did not study his face. They studied the medical scan rotating over his chest, a gold-lit model of his heart labeled in precise trade language. Terran Adaptive Biocore, living autonomic variability intact, high-value cardiac resonance potential. Ethan read the words twice and filed the last 3 under things lawyers would enjoy later. The auctioneer, a silver-skinned creature with a voice like expensive glass, lifted a crystal rod. Lot 17. Ethan James Caldwell, Earth citizen, majority owner of Caldwell Helix Biomedical and Caldwell Orbital Energy. Verified alive, unsedated, and neurologically stable. Bidding resumes at 900 million credits. Ethan looked at the scan, then at the room. You spelled kidnapping wrong. A ripple of amusement moved through the balconies. The auctioneer's smile thinned. The human retains speech. Usually considered a feature. Not always. Ethan shifted half an inch, enough to feel the field tighten around his ribs. The floor's reflection gave him more than the room wanted to give away. 12 visible drones. For ceiling turrets hidden behind ornamental vents. 2 pressure doors. 1 service curtain on the lower level where a small shape had been standing too still for too long. A child, maybe 10 by Earth standards, with gray-green skin, bare feet, and a labor tag pulsing dull orange at the throat. The boy held a cleaning wand and stared at the live rail beneath the balcony, as if deciding whether obedience hurt less than fear. The bid rose to 1 billion. Someone toasted. Ethan kept watching the boy. The lower rail sparked once, subtle and hungry. Hey, Ethan called, not toward the auctioneer, not toward the buyers, but toward the curtain. Step back from the rail. 6 inches. Now. The boy froze. A guard near the service door turned. Ethan raised his bound hands just enough for the restraint field to bite, drawing every eye to him instead. It's live on the bottom edge, he said. Bad maintenance or cheap murder. Hard to tell from here. The boy stumbled back. The rail snapped blue where his fingers had almost touched it. Silence hit the chamber in a clean sheet. No one thanked Ethan. That told him plenty. The auctioneer tapped the rod against the field. Silence the lot. A drone dropped from the ceiling, its muzzle opening like a black flower. Ethan looked at it without stepping away. Panic had not saved Rebecca in the Seattle hospital. It had not saved the children when the Boston ward lost power during the hurricane. It would not save him now. That your best customer service? He asked. Before the drone fired, every light in the auction house went out. Not dimmed. Died. The scan above Ethan collapsed into gold dust. Bidding halos popped one by one. Gravity stuttered, and crystal cups skittered across balconies while nobles reached for dignity and found rails instead. In the dark, 1 pair of boots crossed the hall with measured precision. No squad thunder. No theatrical army. Just 1 person moving like the room had already lost the argument. A woman's voice cut through the emergency static, low and cold. Release him. Backup lights rose in pale strips along the floor. She stood at the far entrance, tall and blue-green. Her white hair braided with silver thread, her armor fitted close over a body held upright by delicate medical supports. Tiny lights pulsed beneath her collarbone, uneven and failing. Her face carried royal stillness. Her breathing did not. The auctioneer bowed so quickly the crystal rod shook. Princess Lyra Voss. This sale was registered under private salvage exemption. Then unregister it. The asset has competing claims. Lyra's silver-violet eyes moved from Ethan's chest scan to the burn on his wrist, then to the servant boy hiding behind the curtain. The asset warned your staff before your staff warned him. Ethan watched her watch the boy. Pain flickered under her composure. Not softness, not yet, but recognition of an ugly detail she could not unsee. The restraint field dropped with a soft click. Ethan rubbed his wrist once and stayed where he was. "Princess," he said, "I'm guessing this isn't a rescue." Lyra stepped closer. The medical lights under her armor skipped, and one gloved hand brushed the wall before she made it a choice instead of a stumble. "No, Mr. Caldwell." She looked at his chest again, at the living rhythm no dead machine could copy. "It's a transfer of custody." Ethan glanced at the boy's bare feet, then back at her. "He comes too." A guard started to object. Lyra lifted 2 fingers. The objection died unborn. "Temporary protection hold," she said. "Neutral birth. No labor tag enforcement." The boy covered the orange tag at his throat with both hands. Ethan gave no smile, no thanks, nothing cheap enough for the room to misunderstand. Lyra turned toward the exit, each step timed against the hidden machinery, keeping her upright. "Walk with me," she said, "or stay and let them improve their paperwork." Ethan stepped out of the dead auction light. "You still haven't said what you want." Lyra did not look back. "Your heart," the nobles whispered. The boy stopped breathing. Ethan saw the princess's hand tighten against her ribs, saw the fear she carried like state property, and followed because the worst rooms always revealed themselves after the first door opened. The boarding tunnel to the Morning Star did not look royal. It looked clinical, a silver corridor sealed in quarantine glass, with pressure doors every 30 feet and blue sterilization light crawling over Ethan's suit like cold rain. Vera turned beneath the transparent floor, storm systems flashing across the dark hemisphere in wide silent veins. Tubin walked close behind him in borrowed thermal slippers too large for his feet, one hand still covering the dull orange labor tag at his throat. Ethan slowed when the boy's steps dragged. A guard clicked his tongue. Ethan turned his head just enough to make the man decide whether he wanted witnesses. "He's 10, Ethan said. "Maybe 11. You can survive walking at kid speed." The guard's jaw tightened, but Lyra raised one hand without turning around. The pace slowed. No apology, no softness, just a correction made before pride could argue. At the end of the tunnel, the ship opened around them with a quiet mechanical sigh. Ethan expected banners, trophies, some alien version of inherited arrogance. He found an intensive care ward stretched across a warship's spine. No throne, no velvet, no gold except thin circuitry running beneath the floor in pulse-like lines. Medical drones hung from overhead tracks. Fluid columns beat out soft blue measures beside a glass resonance chamber tall enough to hold a small chapel service. The air smelled of antiseptic, overheated metal, and bitter flowers trying to hide sickness. Ethan stopped 3 steps inside. "This is your palace?" Lyra removed one glove finger by finger, buying time from pain with precision. "This is the room keeping me alive." A physician with copper eyes and translucent hands approached with a tablet held against his chest. "Your Highness, your core temperature has dropped to 94.8. Then speak quickly." The doctor looked at Ethan and tried not to stare at his chest. "Mr. Caldwell, your implanted Terran biocore produces adaptive autonomic variability we have never recorded outside Earth. It responds to stress, oxygen debt, grief state regulation, breath rhythm, and endocrine fluctuation without flattening the living signal." Ethan's face did not move, but grief found the old surgical scar beneath his shirt and pressed there. "Who gave you my medical history?" "New Geneva scans flagged your biocore at customs," Lyra said. "My people stole the deeper file." "Nice distinction." "It wasn't nice." That stopped him for half a second. The doctor cleared his throat. "Princess Lyra's royal heart complex is failing because her synthetic stabilizers can no longer match Varani neural variants. Your living rhythm may provide voluntary autonomic resonance. Proximity only." At first, Ethan looked at the glass chamber, then at the restraint sockets folded neatly into the floor. "At first is doing a lot of work." Lyra's eyes sharpened. "I have not authorized extraction, but someone has discussed it." The doctor's silence answered before he did. The Continuity Council considers every theoretical option when the royal line is at risk. Ethan gave a short laugh. That's the cleanest way anyone's ever said cut him open. Extraction would fail, the doctor said quickly. The resonance depends on living variability. Fear corrupts the signal. Sedation flattens it. Separation destroys it. Ethan held his gaze. Say that again when people with nicer coats walk in. The physician looked down. Lyra did not. A tremor passed through the lights beneath her collarbone, and the chamber answered with a low warning chime. For one moment, every guard watched her the way staff watch a cracked support beam. Lyra straightened, turning suffering into posture so smoothly Ethan almost admired it against his will. Tubin made a small sound behind him. The boy's tag had brightened at the throat, responding to ship security. Ethan pointed at it. That comes off before I step near your machine. A guard said. Labor property transfers require docket review. Ethan looked at Lyra. Your Highness. Lyra crossed to a side console. Her fingers moved slowly, each touch costing concentration. Temporary protection hold, she ordered. Neutral berth. Medical scan. Food. No labor tag enforcement while aboard my ship. Full sanctuary requires tribunal approval, the guard said. Then start the petition. The orange tag at Tuvin's throat dimmed from ownership to provisional gray. Not freedom. Not yet. But not a collar screaming either. Ethan crouched just enough to meet the boy's eyes without making him feel displayed. Gray is better than orange, he said. We'll work on the rest. Tuvin nodded once, too hard. The resonance chamber opened with a hiss of warm vapor. The physician gestured toward a marked ring outside the glass. You stand there. No restraints. No sedation. The chamber will map your pulse and attempt low-yield sync. Ethan did not move. I send proof of life to Earth first. Lyra's jaw tightened. In 12 hours. Now. The Council monitors outbound transmissions. Then let them learn I'm hard to misplace. The warning chimes sounded again, lower this time. Lyra's fingers whitened against the console edge. She could have ordered guards forward. Instead, she opened a secure channel window and turned the screen toward him. 20 words. Verified alive. No location data. Ethan typed fast. Marcy alive. Taken under Veyrani royal custody. Preserve protocol. Don't trigger yet. Help Tuvin if named. He sent it before the room could breathe. Only then did he step into the marked ring outside the chamber. The floor lit gold beneath his shoes, finding the bead inside him. Across the glass, blue light stirred under Lyra's skin like dawn trying to remember itself. Ethan loosened his tie and kept his voice flat. For the record, Princess, this still counts as kidnapping. Lyra rested her palm against the glass, close to the light, but not touching him. For the record, Mr. Caldwell, I know. The first resonance cycle lasted 53 minutes, long enough for the Morning Star to learn Ethan's pulse and short enough for everyone to pretend the room had not changed. Gold light traveled from the ring beneath his shoes into the chamber glass, then broke into thin blue threads beneath Lyra's skin. Her breathing steadied by degrees, not like a miracle, not like grace, more like a failing engine accepting a careful hand on the throttle. Ethan watched the monitors instead of her face. Heart rate, oxygen uptake, neural variance, autonomic match. A second column tracked stress corruption in the signal, rising whenever a guard shifted too close or a drone passed overhead. He pointed at it. That number spikes when your people hover. Dr. Sale followed his finger, then dismissed 2 guards with a sharp look. The stress column dropped. Ethan said nothing, but his expression filed the result away. When the chamber opened, Lyra stepped out slower than before, steadier, but not safe. She reached for the console to hide the effort. Ethan took the tablet from Sale before anyone offered it and began reading the medical cooperation agreement line by line. No sedation without consent, he said. Good. No extraction while subject retains neurological viability. Bad. Lyra's eyes narrowed. It means they can't take your biocore while you're conscious. It means they can argue I stopped being viable after they scare me half to death. He deleted the clause with 2 quick taps. Try this. No extraction under any condition. Living resonance only. Continuous witness recording. Sale looked as if someone had asked him to rewrite scripture in pencil. Lyra looked tired enough to let silence carry her objections. Ethan kept going. No isolation from Earth communications. One verified proof of life every 12 hours. No transfer to archive, preservation deck, research custody, or any phrase invented by cowards with degrees. You edit contracts aggressively, Lyra said. I've met contracts. And disliked them? I dislike what people hide inside them. She stood across the console from him, 6 feet of sterile light between them, close enough for the chamber to keep reading his rhythm, far enough that neither owed the other comfort. Tubbins sat in the neutral berth beyond the glass partition, eating with both hands under the watch of a nurse who had removed her weapon belt before entering. Ethan saw that. Lyra saw him see it. The boy is under protection hold, she said. Temporary, Ethan answered. A temporary door is still a wall if someone else holds the key. Her mouth tightened. Then she added a line to the file herself. Petition for neutral tribunal review. Minor labor tagged, suspended pending judgment. Tubbins' name appeared in Varani script and English beneath it. Ethan read it twice. Better. Not enough. Not yet. For the first time, Lyra did not look offended. She looked as if the phrase had found a room already waiting inside her. Sale slid another document forward. The living sovereign clause must be acknowledged before further treatment. Ethan looked up. Now we're getting to the part you didn't mention at customs. Lyra's fingers rested flat on the console, blue against white glass. When a Varani heir approaches medical incapacity, the Continuity Council may assume emergency authority. Define medical incapacity. They define it. Convenient. Yes. The single word carried no defense, which made it harder to attack. Sale expanded the clause. Ancient legal text unfolded over the air in clean, brutal lines. A living sovereign could not be declared incapable if a neutral external witness confirmed conscious consent during treatment. The witness could not be Varani, could not be paid by the court, could not hold military appointment, and could not be under royal ownership. Ethan read the last phrase again. So if I'm property, I can't be your witness. Lyra's eyes held his. Correct. And if I'm your witness, I'm harder for your counsel to own. Also correct. You kidnapped me because you needed my pulse and my signature. I kidnapped you because I was dying and because every legal witness near my world had already been bought. The answer landed without polish. No apology wrapped around it. No soft music. Ethan respected it more than he wanted to. He leaned back from the console and rubbed the red mark on his wrist. That doesn't make it clean. No, doesn't make it smart either. It made it possible. The room hummed around them. Somewhere in the ship, cooling pumps cycled with a sound like distant rain. Ethan thought of New Geneva, of Marcy reading his 20 words and deciding whether to obey him or save him despite himself. He thought of Rebecca in a hospital bed asking him to stop negotiating with death like it was a vendor. He selected the witness clause and added one more condition. Witness status activates only after free medical consent is granted by Ethan J. Caldwell under recorded protest. Lyra read the line. Under recorded protest? I'm helping you survive. I'm not laundering the kidnapping. A faint shadow crossed her face. Fair. And if your counsel tries to classify me as property again, this treatment stops. Sale inhaled sharply. Lyra did not. She signed first, pressing her thumb to the glass until blue light accepted royal blood and failing rhythm. Ethan waited a full second, then pressed his own thumb beside hers. The system chimed. External witness pending. Consent provisional. Treatment authorized. The door to the medical deck opened before anyone could pretend relief. 6 figures in pale ceremonial coats entered without rushing, their presence as sterile as the machines. Lord Malon walked in the center, carrying no weapon, only a tablet and the confidence of a man who believed history was a form he could amend. His eyes moved from the signed agreement to Ethan's wrist, then to Lyra's steadier posture. Your Highness, he said, the council was not informed you had begun constitutional procedure. Lyra closed the contract window with one finger. You are informed now. Malon smiled with the patience of a locked door. Then we should discuss whether the human is competent to witness anything at all. Ethan slipped his hands into his pockets and looked at the polished black preservation cradle being rolled in behind them, clean as a lie. Funny, he said. I was about to ask the same thing about you. Lord Malon did not look like a villain. That was the useful part. His pale ceremonial coat carried no medals, no blood colors, No visible threat beyond the polished black preservation cradle rolling behind him on silent magnetic wheels. He wore authority the way old money wore restraint, fitted so perfectly the room was supposed to forget a body lived underneath it. Lyra stood beside the console with one hand near the signed agreement, close enough to defend it, not close enough to look afraid of losing it. The blue light under her collarbone had steadied after the first cycle, but the steadiness looked borrowed. Malon measured that at once. "Your recovery appears improved," he said. "How disappointing for you," Ethan replied. Dr. Sale's mouth tightened. Malon's gaze touched Ethan with mild interest, the way a banker might inspect a stain on a contract. "Mr. Caldwell, you've had a difficult morning. I'm sure you feel involved. I was auctioned by people who called me a lot number, moved under royal custody, scanned like equipment, and asked to sign constitutional paperwork in a language my lawyer hasn't billed me for yet. Involved seems fair. Colorful," Malon said. "Not competent." Lyra's fingers flexed once against the console edge. Malon saw it and smiled at her with such careful sadness it felt colder than contempt. "Your Highness, the Continuity Council has reviewed the preliminary resonance data. The human's living signal is valuable but emotionally unstable. His participation risks contaminating both treatment and succession." Ethan nodded toward the floating stress column. "The data says stress spikes when armed officials enter the room with furniture shaped like a coffin." One aide glanced at the cradle. Malon did not. "Preservation cradle. Non-invasive until authorized. That sentence was built to survive court." Malon lifted his tablet. A clean schematic appeared above the cradle. Soft restraints, neural mapping bands, cardiac imaging arrays. Nothing crude enough to trouble a conscience. "We propose archival mapping of the Terran biocore under controlled sedation." Sale stepped forward before fear could catch him. "Sedation will flatten the autonomic variability." Malon's smile remained. "Dr. Sale, your caution is noted." "It isn't caution. It's physiology." The room sharpened around that small act of disobedience. "The resonance is not the organ alone," Sale said, voice low but holding. "It is the living feedback loop. Fear corrupts the signal. Sedation flattens it. Separation destroys it." Ethan looked at Malon. "There." He said it with nicer coats in the room. Malon's patience thinned by one quiet degree. "The Council's duty is continuity. The throne cannot depend on a foreign billionaire's mood." "It depends on my consent," Lyra said. No raised voice. No flourish. Just a fact placed where everyone had to step around it. "And on the witness clause you delayed until I was too weak to read it." Malon turned to her. "Your mother understood that a sovereign body is not private property." Lyra went still. Ethan knew that kind of stillness. It was where old wounds kept their furniture. "My mother died believing a cage was safer if it had a family crest." "Your mother kept this empire intact." "She kept the room intact," Lyra said. "People suffered outside it." The sentence cost her. Ethan saw the small failure in her next breath. He moved the nearest chair with his foot, sliding it beside her without touching her, without turning concern into theater. Lyra did not sit at first. The option simply waited there, quiet and unowned. Malon's eyes dropped to the chair, then returned to Ethan. "You mistake proximity for influence." "Happens in hospitals," Ethan said. "People ignore the janitor until he knows which machines are lying." Malon's tablet chimed. A legal notice opened above the console. "Incapacity review requested. Council medical authority pending." Ethan read it fast. "That's your play. That is our protection." "No. It's a timing trick." She signed while conscious, witnessed under protest, before your review. "You don't get to move the clock because you dislike who saw it." Malon's eyes cooled. "You presume Earth protocols matter here." Ethan removed his cracked watch from his jacket pocket and turned the biometric light toward the room. "My absence protocol matters anywhere with receivers. If I miss 2 scheduled check-ins, my office releases the new Geneva abduction record, custom scan logs, custody record, and every message I've sent since boarding this ship to Earth courts, neutral medical boards, and a woman named Marcy who treats subpoenas like weather." Lyra looked at him. She had known he was prepared. She had not known how prepared. Malon recalculated in silence. The silence told Ethan the leverage had landed. The counselor closed his tablet with a soft click. 72 hours, Your Highness. After that, biology will make better decisions than sentiment." Lyra finally sat. not because Malon had weakened her, but because refusing help from furniture was not policy. Ethan laid his torn jacket over the chair back, hiding the tremor in her left hand from the room. No one mentioned it. The preservation cradle rolled out behind the counselors, polished, harmless, obscene. When the doors sealed, the monitors resumed their soft counting. Lyra looked at the fading legal notice. He'll override the ship. Ethan stood near the console, close enough for the chamber to keep reading his pulse, far enough not to pretend the morning had made them friends. Then we stopped calling this a medical problem. 12 hours after Malon left, the Morningstar stopped feeling like a ship and started feeling like a room where everyone had chosen a side too slowly. The medical deck kept its blue lights low around Lyra and its gold pulse alive whenever Ethan stepped into the resonance ring, two colors sharing the floor without trusting each other. 3 cycles had passed. None looked like miracles. The first let Lyra walk 30 feet without touching the wall. The second gave her 15 minutes of steady breath before the fever came back. The third ended early when Dr. Sale caught a council firmware patch raising forced output by 7% and killed the feed with both hands shaking over the console. Ethan saw the patch ID before it vanished. He wrote it on the inside of a meal wrapper because men who survived hostile markets did not trust deleted files. Lyra noticed the wrapper. You collect trash? Evidence comes in different packaging. She sat across from him at the narrow recovery table, armor loosened at the throat, a plain thermal cloak covering the ports along her spine. A cup of hearthroot steamed by Ethan's elbow, untouched after one brave sip. Tuvin had laughed when Ethan called it boiled nickels, then tried to apologize for laughing. Now the boy sat behind the partition with a nurse, sounding out the gray status on his temporary tag. Review pending. Not freedom. Not yet. But no labor tag enforcement, and no orange light screaming ownership at his throat. Lyra watched him repeat the words. He keeps checking whether it changes back. Ethan adjusted the sensor strip around his wrist. Kids believe systems when systems hurt them. And adults. Adults learn which systems lie politely. Lyra lowered her eyes to the audit file open before her. 14 minor labor tags aboard her own ship. 31 bonded transfers tied to Royal Medical Logistics. 6 emergency exemptions signed in her name while she had been unconscious or fevered. She did not deny it. That bothered Ethan more than denial would have. Denial made clean enemies. Recognition made people complicated. I didn't read these, she said. No, the council used my access authority. Yes. You could say more. Ethan looked at the surgical scar barely visible beneath his open collar, then at the quiet numbers on Sale's monitor. Hospitals lie less when the numbers hurt. Lyra waited. He gave her nothing else. She looked down at his biocore file instead. Rebecca Caldwell. Trial donor. Adaptive cardiac scaffold. Emergency transfer. Ethan reached across and closed the file with 2 fingers. Not angry. Exact. That part isn't for court. Lyra's hand stayed still beside the tablet. I wasn't going to use it. You used me. Yes. The words sat between them without decoration. Lyra opened a new order and wrote slowly, each letter formal despite the tremor in her fingers. Shipwide audit. Minor labor tags suspended pending neutral review. No bonded personnel assigned to medical logistics. Sale read it over her shoulder. Your Highness, this will alert the council. They already know where we are. They'll call it erratic judgment. Lyra signed anyway. Then let my erratic judgment feed children. Ethan took another sip of hearthroot. His face betrayed him. Tuvin smiled into his sleeve. Lyra saw both of them, and something in her expression changed without becoming soft. Later, during the 4th cycle, Sale recalibrated the chamber to read Ethan's breath variability instead of forcing Lyra's core to chase his heartbeat. Ethan stood outside the glass with one palm on a cold support rail while she sat inside, eyes closed, hands loose on her knees. The gold lines moved slower this time. The blue answered without flaring. Outside the observation glass, Vera's storm bands rolled beneath them, enormous and silent. Lyra opened her eyes. My mother said owing life to outsiders makes a sovereign into a doorway. Ethan watched the monitor settle. Depends what you let through. What would you let through? He thought of Rebecca's empty hospital room, Marcy's furious loyalty, and Tuvin whispering review pending like a prayer. Better air, he said. Lyra did not ask him to explain. By the 30th hour, The chamber no longer treated Ethan's pulse like fuel. It treated it like a conversation. That was when the first hidden council command tried to answer for her. The hidden command entered without an alarm, which made it more dangerous. Dr. Sale caught it in a number that should not have moved. Forced output tolerance climbing from 3% to 12, then 17, then 22. His copper eyes widened over the console. That isn't my calibration. Ethan was already watching the floor. The gold beneath his shoes had sharpened from a pulse into a command, hard-edged and too bright. Inside the glass, Lyra's blue resonance flared, then pulled inward as if the chamber had stopped listening to her body and started dragging it by the nerves. Her eyes opened. Sale, I'm locking it out. His fingers moved fast. The system answered with a polite tone. Council Firmware Authority. Emergency Continuity Optimization. Clean words. Dirty hands. Ethan stepped off the ring. The gold light followed half an inch, then snapped back into place. It's chasing the signal. Sale swallowed. It's forcing synchronization before her core can regulate. Shut it down. I can't. The chamber temperature climbed. Condensation ran down the glass in shaking lines. Lyra pressed one hand to the bench, not rising, just refusing to fold around the pane. The blue under her collarbone flashed in broken bursts. Two guards moved closer, not toward her exactly, but toward containment. Ethan saw her see them. The shame crossed her face before the fever did. Back up, he said. One guard looked at him. This is a royal medical event. Then stop treating her like a reactor leak. Lyra's jaw tightened. Ethan. Not warning. Not thanks. Control stretched thin enough to show light through it. Ethan kept his voice low. I'm talking to them, not for you. Her anger held his for 1 second, then gave way to something harder to name. Sale opened a manual panel and yanked out a fiber lead. Sparks snapped across his wrist. Manual breath mode is the only bypass, he said. It requires human proximity inside the safe ring and sovereign authorization from within the chamber. Ethan looked through the fogged glass. Open it. Lyra shook her head once. Heat exposure could disrupt your biocore. So could standing here watching. That is not medical reasoning. It's the reasoning available. The glass flashed white around her palm, then blue, then white again as the council command fought her. She dragged her fingers across the interior strip. The seal released with a hiss of hot vapor. Ethan stepped inside the safe ring without rushing, without giving the guards a performance they could mistake for bravery. Heat wrapped around him like an oven opened in July, thick with antiseptic and overheated circuitry. The floor tried to seize his rhythm and turn it into pressure. He slowed his breathing on purpose. 4 counts in, 6 out. The gold light dulled. Lyra stood 3 yards away, one arm braced against the wall, silver-white hair damp against her cheek. Up close, the machinery under her armor sounded delicate, tiny clicks working too hard to imitate life. Ethan sat on the floor before she could spend strength pretending she didn't need to. Bad chamber, he said. Her mouth tightened around pain. Built by the finest engineers in the Empire. They built a leash and called it treatment. Sale's voice crackled through the speaker. Manual breath mode is open for 30 seconds. Ethan lifted 2 fingers and tapped them once against his sternum. Slow. Then again. Don't chase the beat, he said. Follow the exhale. Lyra's eyes flashed. I know how to breathe. Sure. The room disagrees. A breath almost broke into a laugh, and the blue flare beneath her skin softened. Ethan tapped again, slower. In through your nose. Out like you're fogging a windshield in winter. Vera doesn't have windshields. Borrow Earth's. She lowered herself to the floor opposite him, not graceful, not defeated, just alive enough to choose the ground before it chose her. The chamber fought them. White light climbed the walls. The forced sink tried to close around her pulse. Ethan kept his eyes on the wet line of glass beside her instead of her face, giving her one small privacy the Empire had never learned to offer. Tap. Wait. Exhale. The stress column fell by 2 points. Then 5. Then 11. The gold light stopped pushing and began spreading. Lyra's shoulders lowered by a fraction. Her hands opened on her knees. The chamber, confused by voluntary regulation, reduced output to listen. Bodies don't like being conquered, Ethan said, barely above the hum. Even by help. Lyra breathed out long enough for the blue beneath her skin to answer without flaring. Outside the chamber, One guard removed his hand from his sidearm. Sale used the opening to sever the council patch. The white light collapsed into amber with a small mechanical click, the sound of a bad idea losing power. Lyra stayed on the floor, breathing in the heat beside the man she had kidnapped, while the finest machine in the Empire finally stopped giving orders. Ethan wiped sweat from his jaw with his ruined sleeve. For the record, your engineers owe you an apology. Lyra looked at the fogged glass, where their shapes blurred into blue and gold. They'll write a report. That's worse. The corner of her mouth moved, brief and painfully earned. Then the medical deck lights shifted from amber to council white, and every unlocked door on the ship sealed at once. Council white did not flash. It settled, clean and total, replacing the medical deck's blue with a color that made every surface look scrubbed of responsibility. The chamber vents sighed shut. Dr. Sale's console locked beneath his burned hands. Guards looked down at their wrist displays and found new orders waiting there before their consciences could form old ones. By the 69th hour, the Morning Star had stopped pretending medicine and politics were separate rooms. A voice Ethan recognized from too many polite disasters filled the deck. Emergency Continuity Authority is now active. Princess Lyra Voss is under protective command review. External witness Ethan Caldwell is to be relocated to archival custody for preservation of state interest. Ethan stepped out of the chamber, shirt damp, pulse still wired into 3 unwilling machines. Archival custody, he said. You people ever use words that don't need a shower? No one laughed. Even Tuvin, visible through the partition with a blanket around his shoulders, stayed very still. His gray protection tag flickered as the council system tried to reclassify it. The nurse beside him covered the tag with her palm and pretended she was checking his throat. Ethan saw it. Lyra saw it too. Her face shifted by 1 degree, not toward panic, not toward rage, but toward arithmetic. What could still be saved? What had already been spent? Sale pulled at the console's manual release. It refused him with a soft tone. They're locking the chamber logs, he said. The firmware patch, the stress data, the consent record. All of it. Lyra crossed the deck too quickly and paid for it halfway there. Her shoulder struck a support column. She made the contact look intentional by resting her hand against the metal and lifting her chin. How much command authority remains on my bracelet? Sale looked at the silver band burned blue at the edges from the earlier bypass. Ceremonial Emergency Reserve. 1 use. It was designed for evacuation during a succession attack. Ethan watched her thumb move over the bracelet seam. What is 1 use by? Lyra did not answer him. She opened a lower maintenance drawer beneath the console, removed a flat silver access card, and held it like something she had hated carrying. Deck 12. West Spine. Courier pod registered to a neutral diplomatic relay. Earth registry codes inside. It can clear 6,000 miles before their heavier locks catch the launch. Ethan stared at the card. You had an exit ready. I had leverage ready. For me or against me? Yes. The honesty landed ugly and clean. The far door clicked as council officers began overriding the medical deck from the outside. 1 bolt released. Then another. The guards watched Lyra instead of the door. Their orders said one thing. Their eyes asked for another. Lyra placed the card on the console between herself and Ethan. When I took you, I told myself necessity had a shorter name than guilt. It doesn't. Ethan picked up the card but did not pocket it. You're not asking me to forgive you. No, smart. Late. The 3rd bolt released. Tubin flinched behind the glass as his tag pulsed orange for half a second, then gray again under the nurse's hand. Lyra saw the color change. Whatever hesitation remained in her died there, quietly. She pressed her bracelet against the dead console. The silver band split open along its seam, spilling blue light over her fingers. Sale took 1 step forward. Your Highness, if you use the reserve for him, you can't use it for yourself. I know. The council will call it abandonment of sovereign duty. Lyra looked at Tuvin, then at Ethan, then at the chamber still warm from forced obedience. They've been teaching me duty in a language with too few people in it. She drove her thumb into the bracelet core. The air snapped with static. A hidden panel opened near the western wall, revealing a narrow service passage lit in amber, untouched by council white. At the same moment, Ethan's phone, sealed in a clear evidence pouch on Sale Station, woke with a single Earth-coded vibration. Marcy's delayed reply blinked across the cracked screen. Define alive. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Lyra pushed the access card against his chest, not tenderly, not ceremonially, just hard enough to make him take the weight of it. Go before Malon turns you into an argument no one can hear. And you? I become evidence. That's a terrible plan. It's the first honest one I've had. The final bolt released. The main door opened 3 inches, filling the floor with brighter white. Lyra moved in front of Ethan, not as a captor guarding property, but as a failing sovereign spending her last private authority on someone else's freedom. Her hands were empty. Her bracelet was dead. Her knees did not quite trust her. Ethan looked past her to the amber passage, where the courier pod waited with Earth codes, clean air, and every reasonable excuse in the galaxy. Then he looked at Tuvin's gray tag, Sale's burned wrist, Lyra's unarmed back, and the council light widening across the floor. He slipped the access card into his pocket, but his feet stayed where they were. The council officers entered with sealed tablets, white gloves, and the terrible calm of people who had found a way to make panic look administrative. Lord Malon came last, his pale coat untouched by the heat and sweat still clinging to the chamber glass. He glanced at Lyra's dead bracelet, the amber passage open behind Ethan, and the access card missing from the console. You have spent your reserve authority poorly, Your Highness. Lyra stood between him and Ethan with nothing left to authorize except her own posture. Then file a complaint. Malon's eyes moved to the guards. Relocate the witness. Nobody moved for 1 full second. It was not rebellion. Not yet. Just the small delay that appears when an order reaches the hand before the heart. Malon noticed. Now. Lyra turned her head just enough for Ethan to see her profile. Go. He looked at Tuvin behind the partition, at Dr. Sale's burned wrist, at the chamber logs trapped behind council locks. Every reasonable argument pointed toward the amber corridor. Marcy had proof of life. The courier pod had Earth registry codes. A living witness outside Virani jurisdiction could do more damage than a dead one inside a medical deck. Ethan had built companies by knowing when to leave a room before the room ate him. He stepped backward into the passage. Lyra did not watch him go. That was harder. The service spine closed around him in narrow amber light. Hot pipes along one wall. Emergency ladders every 20 feet. The deck vibrating under his shoes as the ship shifted into full lockdown. His phone buzzed again inside his pocket, signal weak but alive. Marcy, you have 9 minutes before I stop listening to your instructions. He kept walking. The courier pod waited where Lyra said it would, tucked inside a maintenance blister barely wider than a delivery truck. Hatch open, Earth registry active, oxygen green, launch vector plotted toward a neutral relay. 6,000 miles of distance. 9 minutes before Marcy stopped obeying and turned his disappearance into a diplomatic wildfire. Ethan placed his hand on the pod frame. Cool metal. Clean escape. From the deck behind him came a sound he felt before he understood. The resonance chamber restarting under council command. A low white hum with no pulse in it. His phone caught a fragmented medical alert from Sale's emergency band. Forced protocol active. Fear noise rising. Sovereign core instability. Ethan closed his eyes. Rebecca had once asked him why he always treated leaving as wisdom and staying as weakness. He had told her staying was expensive. She had smiled from a hospital bed and said, then spend it somewhere that matters. The pod counted down without being asked. 8 minutes. Ethan looked into the empty seat, at the straps waiting to save exactly one person. Then he stepped back from the hatch. By the time he returned to the medical deck, Lyra was on her knees inside the reactivated chamber, not restrained, not touched, just trapped inside a machine that had learned coercion from the people controlling it. White light hammered through the glass in clean waves. Her blue resonance tried to answer and broke into static every time fear distorted the signal. Malon stood at the console, reading the data like a verdict. The subject has returned, one officer said. Ethan walked past him. Witness, he said. The word reached the room before he did. Sale looked up, relief and terror fighting across his face. If you connect while the force protocol is active, it could feed the override. Not if it isn't forced. Malon raised a hand. Mr. Caldwell, unauthorized interference will void your protections. Ethan stopped at the chamber interface. Good thing I'm not asking for protection. Lyra lifted her head through the glare. Her silver-violet eyes found him, furious with pain and with the knowledge that he had come back. You had a way out. Still do. Use it. No. The word was small enough to be human and heavy enough to change the room. Ethan placed the access card on the floor where every camera could see it, then pressed his palm to the chamber interface. It rejected him once. He did not move. Record this, he said. Sale understood first. He opened the witness channel with his unburned hand. Ethan spoke toward the console, not Malon. Ethan James Caldwell, Earth citizen. External witness under recorded protest. I consent to voluntary autonomic resonance only. No sedation. No extraction. No ownership. I am not property. Neither is she. The chamber searched his pulse. It found fear, anger, exhaustion, grief, and beneath all of it, a rhythm held steady by choice. The white output faltered. Gold light entered through his palm, thin as wire at first, then warmer, slower, refusing to push. Lyra's hand rose from the chamber floor and came to rest against the glass opposite his, separated by 1 clear inch and every wrong thing that had brought them there. The system tried to classify the event and failed twice before old law woke beneath new code. Voluntary autonomic resonance confirmed. External witness active. Sovereign consent restored. Council emergency authority void. Malon stared at the words as if language had betrayed him. Ethan did not look away from Lyra. The blue beneath her skin steadied, not because a machine had conquered her body, but because someone had finally offered help without owning the answer. Around them, the council white dimmed to medical blue, and the ship exhaled like it had been holding its breath for 70 hours. The words stayed above the console for 3 silent seconds, bright enough to make every white glove in the room look dirty. Council emergency authority void. No one lunged. No one shouted. The ship had already made the first move by unlocking Dr. Sale's console and returning the medical lights to blue. Law, for once, had arrived before violence could dress itself as necessity. Lyra rose inside the chamber with one palm still near Ethan's on the glass, not touching, not reaching, only steadying herself against the fact that she was alive by consent and witnessed by a man who owed her nothing. The chamber door opened. Heat rolled out. Ethan stepped back first, giving her room to enter her own life without being escorted into it. Malon found his voice as she crossed the threshold. Your Highness, the Council requires private review before any public statement. Lyra looked at the dead bracelet on her wrist, then at Tuvin behind the partition, then at the black archive cradle waiting uselessly in the hall. No one word. No speech wrapped around it. She turned to Sale. Open the sovereign medical feed. Sale hesitated only long enough to understand the size of the line he was about to cross. Then he opened it. The feed was constitutional, live, unedited, and tamper-proof once sovereign consent had been restored. Across the Morning Star, across Vera's capital ring, across every receiver tied to royal succession law, the medical deck appeared as it was: cracked glass, burned consoles, the auction record, Tuvin's labor tag log, the council firmware patch, Ethan's recorded consent, Lyra's restored status, and Malon's preservation orders stacked in cold sequence. The Empire saw its clean machine from the inside. Lyra stood before the feed without a crown, without sealed ceremonial armor, a blue-green princess in a damaged medical ward with fever still bright at her temples. The Continuity Council is suspended under the Living Sovereign Clause, she said. A neutral civilian tribunal will review every off-world detention, every bonded medical contract, and every labor tag signed under emergency authority. Malon stepped forward. You lack quorum. One guard removed his council-white wrist seal and placed it on the floor. Then another. Then a nurse. Then Sale, with his burned wrist shaking only after the seal left his hand. The sound of small objects touching metal traveled through the open feed like rain beginning. Lyra looked toward Tuvin. All minor labor tags aboard this vessel are frozen pending sanctuary review. Tuvin's protection hold is upgraded to full tribunal custody under neutral law. Tuvin covered his throat, but this time his fingers found only gray light fading to soft green. He did not smile right away. Children taught by systems waited to see whether kindness stayed. Ethan saw that, and looked away before the boy had to feel watched. Malon's power did not collapse dramatically. It drained by procedure, which suited him. Officers stopped awaiting his gestures. Doors stopped opening for his badge. The cradle was rolled out by 2 guards who would not meet his eyes. No one touched him. The record was enough. Hours later, when Vera's sunrise spread copper and white across the observation glass, Ethan stood near the departure lock with his jacket folded over one arm and his verified Earth channel finally open. Marcy's reply waited on the cracked screen. Alive is acceptable. Furious is scheduled. He could hear her voice in it, and almost laughed. Tubin hurried up in oversized boots and handed him a sealed pouch of hearthroot leaves. For your bad coffee, the boy said. Ethan accepted it like a diplomatic gift. Earth may retaliate. Tubin's smile arrived small, then stayed. Lyra approached without a crown, her white hair unbraided over one shoulder, the medical lights beneath her collarbone slow and steady now. She stopped a respectful foot away. Your pod is ready. No tracker. No escort unless you request one. I'll risk the quiet. You usually do? No. I'm learning. She held out his missing cufflink, polished and unnecessary. This was found in the auction house. Ethan took it. Their fingers did not brush. Neither of them corrected that. You'll have a hard week, he said. Lyra looked past him to the planet below, where morning was touching cities that had not yet decided whether truth was a threat or a cure. Several. Good luck, princess. Lyra, she said. Not a plea. A name returned to its owner. Ethan nodded once. At the hatch, he turned back and placed 2 fingers lightly against his sternum, the same slow signal he had used in the chamber, changed now from instruction into farewell. Across the lock, Lyra placed her palm over her own heart. The shuttle door sealed between them with a soft breath. As Ethan pulled away from the morning star, he saw her through the glass, crownless, standing in a cracked medical deck, one hand resting on Tuvin's shoulder while an empire finally listened without applause. He had not given her his heart by dying. He had trusted her with what it meant to live. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story moved you, challenged you, or stayed with you for even a moment, leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Galactic Contact for more powerful cinematic HFY stories from across the stars.